They thought it was just a harmless prank night after night. Strangers kept sneaking into her backyard, laughing, splashing in her pool, taking what wasn't theirs at first. She ignored it, hoping it would stop, but it didn't. The trespassing became bolder, more daring, and each night left her feeling powerless and watched. Something inside her shifted that night, a quiet anger that would not be ignored. She decided it was time to take control, but she didn't know how far this would go, or what she would have to do to make them pay. What happens next changes everything, and nobody saw it coming. It was a quiet summer evening in a suburban neighborhood where life felt safe and predictable. She had lived here for years, enjoying the simple pleasures, a warm cup of tea on the porch, the laughter of children playing nearby, and the sparkling water of her backyard pool that had become her personal sanctuary. Her days were filled with work, friends, and the comforting routines that made life feel steady. But beneath the calm, she had begun to notice small things: shadows moving near the fence, the faint sound of splashing when no one was supposed to be there. At first, she convinced herself it was nothing, just the imagination playing tricks. But there was an unease she couldn't shake, a tension that suggested something darker was creeping into her life. Something about these intrusions felt personal, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. What she didn't yet realize was that this seemingly ordinary neighborhood held hidden prejudices, and the trespassers weren't just careless. They were emboldened by assumptions and biases that would soon collide with her resolve. The first night it happened, she told herself it was an accident, a misplaced ball, a neighbor's child, nothing more. But the second night, and the third, the same pattern repeated. They came in twos or threes, laughing and splashing, disregarding the fence, her property, her privacy. Each intrusion was deliberate, brazen, a challenge that left her heart pounding and her mind racing. She called the local authorities once, hoping a report would be enough, but they dismissed it lightly, shrugging it off as a minor neighborhood nuisance. That response stung more than the intrusion itself, a subtle reminder that some people's safety and boundaries mattered less than others. She started documenting everything: footprints in the grass, muddy towels left by the pool, photos of shadows lurking near her gate. Every image, every mark told the same story: disrespect, disregard, entitlement. And as the nights went on, she noticed a disturbing pattern. The intruders weren't just careless kids, they were teenagers from the nearby community, confident in the knowledge that she, a black woman living alone, would hesitate to confront them directly. Their boldness carried a quiet, unspoken message, one she felt in the pit of her stomach. They didn't expect to be challenged. Fear mixed with frustration. She tried shouting, waving from the porch, even using lights and cameras to intimidate them. The trespassing continued. Her sanctuary, once a place of peace and refuge, had become a theater of tension and anxiety. Friends urged caution, neighbors gave empty reassurances, and the sense of isolation grew heavier. Each night she began locking herself inside earlier, checking windows, pacing the yard, constantly alert, always anticipating the next intrusion. Sleep became restless, dreams filled with laughter that wasn't hers and shadows that moved without permission. But something inside her refused to be passive. The anger simmered quietly at first, then grew hotter, stronger. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her life. Each night the intruders returned, each night their confidence seemed to grow. It fueled a resolve she had never needed before. They were underestimating her, assuming she would remain powerless. They didn't know she was preparing, studying, planning. Every step they took on her property, every careless splash, became a challenge, a test she was ready to meet. And then one night, it happened again, but this time, she was ready in a way they could never have imagined. The tension reached a breaking point, a silent countdown to confrontation that would change everything. She waited, heart pounding, knowing that when the moment came, there would be no turning back. That night, the air felt heavier than usual, thick with anticipation. She watched from her porch as shadows moved near the fence, the familiar laughter cutting through the stillness like a knife. But this time, she didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, heart racing, every sense alert. The teenagers froze for a moment, as if sensing a shift in the energy around them, then continued, emboldened by their assumption that she wouldn't act. She raised her voice, firm, unyielding, demanding they leave. But words alone weren't enough. One of them sneered, mocking her, pushing boundaries further, testing her patience. Fear surged. She knew how quickly situations could escalate, how small misunderstandings could spiral into violence. And yet, beneath that fear, a burning clarity took over. She would not allow her safety, her dignity, her very space to be dismissed. With calculated precision, she activated the lights and cameras she had installed, flooding the yard in blinding illumination. The sudden glare stunned them, the sound of recording devices clicking and whirring filling the air. Their laughter faltered, replaced by hesitation, confusion, and a growing sense of being exposed. For the first time, the balance of power shifted. They weren't invincible, they weren't untouchable, and then she took a final, decisive step. Every boundary, every mark of intrusion, every act of disregard became a silent accusation, a mirror reflecting their arrogance. They stumbled back, realizing too late that they had underestimated her. The night, once hers to dread, became hers to reclaim. The trespassers, faces pale and frozen in disbelief, were confronted not by anger alone, but by the undeniable truth of her resolve. As the last shadow retreated into the darkness, she stood alone, heart still pounding, mind racing. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream could have been, charged with the weight of what had just transpired. It was a moment of triumph, but also a reminder. The fight for respect and justice was far from over. How many more would have to learn this the hard way before the world truly saw the cost of its prejudices? In the quiet aftermath, she stood in the glow of her reclaimed backyard, chest still heaving, mind racing. The trespassers were gone, but the tension lingered, a reminder of the night spent feeling unsafe in her own home. Relief mixed with exhaustion, and a sense of bittersweet victory settled in. She had defended her space, but the deeper wound remained. The knowledge that her fear had been rooted not in mere mischief, but in the assumptions of those who judged her because of the color of her skin. In that moment, she realized the struggle was never just about a pool or a few nights of trespassing. It was about the daily reminders of inequality, the invisible barriers, the subtle messages that certain lives are less protected, less valued. Her fight was a microcosm of a larger, systemic injustice, one that countless others experienced silently, alone, or dismissed by those in positions of power. Yet, standing there, she also felt something else, an undeniable strength, a refusal to be diminished. Her actions that night were more than a personal victory, they were a statement, a challenge to the assumptions that fuel prejudice and entitlement. She understood that change begins when courage meets persistence, when people refuse to let fear dictate their lives. The night ended, but the lesson endured. Safety, dignity, and respect are not privileges to be assumed, they are rights to be claimed, fiercely and unapologetically. And as she walked back inside, locking the door behind her, one question lingered in the air, echoing far beyond her backyard. How many more will have to fight like this before the world finally begins to see the cost of its biases? Her story wasn't just hers. It was a call to recognize injustice, to confront it, and to never underestimate the power of standing up, even when the odds feel impossible.